Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is the ultimate choice, the special election broadcast program of Alive Television. I am Olubenga George. Today is an interesting day looking at the aftermath of elections in Nigeria and looking at the preparations that led to that election and some of the provisions that have been made, especially by law, which were either followed or not followed. We will look into all that amidst the continuous election petitions by opposition parties in the presidential election that held on the 25th of February. First, let's begin with presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, has said he withdrew a motion before the appeal court over a request to inspect electoral materials because the issue had been overtaken by events. In a statement, Abubakar said that the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, had already granted him access to inspect the materials, hence his withdrawal of the motion. He said the clarification was important following insinuations and mischievous reporting of the withdrawal of the application for the Independent National Electoral Commission to grant access to his legal team and the PDP on the inspection of the documents related to February 25 presidential election. News may report that the appellate court had granted the request of the PDP and Abubakar to be granted unfettered access to the INEC documents used for the presidential election. The media reports that on Tuesday, at a conference meeting between lawyers of the PDP, Labour Party, APC, and INEC, access was eventually granted to the legal team of the PDP by INEC. Abubakar said when the matter came up for hearing on Wednesday, the legal team withdrew the two motions. He said motions were withdrawn because access had already been granted on Tuesday to Abubakar and the PDP. In the same vein, the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, has said he is confident in the judiciary to deliver the right judgment with regard to the case before the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal, where he is challenging the result of the just concluded February 25 presidential election. Obi expressed his confidence in the judiciary during a meeting interview on Thursday morning. The Labour Party candidate said he had no reason to doubt the court, stating that Nigeria has one of the finest judiciary in the world. However, politicians are people trying to corrupt the judiciary. Peter Obi, also the Labour Party candidate, in the just concluded presidential election, described the poll as the worst in the history of Nigeria. Obi, while speaking on the same interview, said the election was a great setback in the country's democratic process. The former governor of Anambra maintained that the election was the worst in the country's history because of the hope and the huge expenditure invested in technology as supported by the electoral law 2022. Welcome to the Ultimate Choice. I'll go on this quick break. When I return, I will be joined by my guest, political analyst, who will help us look into some of the intricacies of these issues. Stay with us. We'll be right back in a second. Welcome back to the Ultimate Choice, everyone. Now, joining me to look into the issues of election petitions tribunals and other issues relating to the preparation for the presidential elections and, of course, the governorship elections is Fineface Nsikak, right here in the studio. He's the political analyst, by the way. It's good to have you join me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Really good to see you.
So do we get to say Happy New Year?
Maybe I should say Happy New Year. That's a good way to start.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you again. It's interesting, especially looking at, the political arena in the country. From the last time that I saw you, it's been a lot of interesting activities that cannot be unbundled, within the short time that we have. But most important is the presidential election that's held in the country, on the 25th of February, which is almost 3 weeks away from here now. And it has generated a lot of controversies. It has generated a lot of decisions. It has created a lot of insights. And of course, it has also brought joy and happiness to a lot of people in the country, especially those who won in the elections. But I'd like to ask you, on a more generalistic point of view, what is the most interesting thing to you about the election processes, especially to the presidential elections that held on the 25th of February?
Well, I think the most interesting part of it is the ongoing battle, the tribunal, the election tribunal, and all that. Because we've had Nigerians come out to say, look, just put a call across to the president-elect and just congratulate him and then bring an end to this. But we've had the likes of Atiku Abubakar of the People Democratic Party saying, look, we'll meet in court. And we've also had the Labour Party standard bearer, Peter Obi, saying, I won this election and I'm going to prove it to Nigerians. So I think, this has got to be the most interesting part. Although, before we got into the tribunal issue and all that, I think the most interesting part of this election was the build-up, the whole joy and excitement about the beavers, because Nigerians felt that for once we'll be able to have a free and fair elections where politicians wouldn't be able to rig, because there's this mindset we've had as a people over time that elections are being rigged. So Nigerians actually got tired of the process. Nigerians actually lost interest in the process. They lost confidence. But then when INEC came up with the idea of the beavers, talking about how results were going to be uploaded in real time, Nigerians became excited. And because of that, we had a surge in voters' registration. Remember, this particular election saw an increase in the number of voters. And these new voters were said to be youths. It actually means that the youths actually came out en masse to say, look, we are willing to take back our country.
Thank you very much, Fine Face. Let me ask you directly, because from your submissions, it sounded clear. Are you part of the people, who actually believe that the 2023 presidential and National Assembly elections, were not free and fair and credible like we desired?
I wouldn't say it wasn't free and fair, and I wouldn't say it wasn't credible. But if you look at certain reports we had around the nation on the 25th, if you put them together, to a certain extent, you could actually feel that there were certain irregularities. We saw people being threatened in some part of the nation. We saw videos trending of people telling people, look, if you're not going to vote for this candidate, leave this polling unit. We saw reports of people snatching ballot boxes as well. And I think it's a shame for our nation that in the 21st century, certain people are still committing, electoral crimes and coming to polling units to threaten people. Remember, we have the police out there securing the polling units, but then they do not have the permission to carry firearms. So we saw videos of people coming in with firearms, threatening the police, going away with ballot boxes and all that. So if we put all this together, it's for you and I to judge whether it was free and fair. We heard reports of certain people storming some polling units and saying, look, enough of the voting. They just left, they carted away with the materials and all that. So what's the definition of an election that is not free and fair? If you put these things together, it goes to show that, there were certain issues. Yeah. Some polling units results were not uploaded, and Nigerians Nigerians were able to stand and say, look, upload this thing. And from the reports, you could hear some INEC officials say, look, I do not have the password, the network is down. In fact, I saw a very funny video of a guy who had to rush back to his home to bring his generator from his house to be able to power, the polling unit so that results can be uploaded. So if you put all these things side by side, I think it would actually be acceptable for us to say that, yes, there were certain irregularities, and if you put them together, it goes to show that, we still have work to do. And for me, I feel it's embarrassing that in the 21st century, we are still unable to conduct a digital kind of elections.
Those are your views, by the way, and you are very entitled to it. But I do know that a lot of people see and think differently. But nevertheless, there are so many issues, that came up from this presidential elections in the country. But during your submissions, you continue to talk about some people that attack polling units. You began to talk about electoral crimes, and a lot of things came to mind. Is it possible that we can actually tag these people to be supporting any particular candidate in mind?
Well, we can't really say that because from some of the videos we saw, I think apart from at the particular polling unit where someone you could hear a voice saying, "Look, if you're going to vote, if you're not going to vote for a party," I think the only word that we heard on that video was, "If you're not going to vote for a party." And we had about 18 political parties that, were taking part in the election. So you can't really tie it to anyone. Basically. But for me, I feel like we've not made progress with our electoral process.
Okay, well, I'm curious about this, especially because you are aware that over 176,000 polling units, actually were involved in that election. And when you bring about the statistics that you reeled out earlier, and we try to look at it, from the percentile average level. Would we really still continue to say it is free and fair? Because yes, why a lot of people talk about, what I've heard people talk about the most would be that election results weren't transmitted through the IREF portal, like INEC had said. But that the issue of violence, of election, of ballot snatching, like you mentioned, I think to a very minimal extent was reduced in this electoral process.
I think so.
The figure,
if you have to compare it to previous elections, yes. But then remember the woman that was stabbed as well in Lagos State. How do you explain that? An innocent woman just came out to cast her vote to ensure that she's able to contribute to the growth of the nation. And then some people just felt, that they had the right to be able to, So if you put all these things together,
can we actually exonerate any party above the other, especially amongst the key players in this election, where these issues are concerned? Because I'm also aware that a particular party, made a press statement, that I witnessed, and they were talking about how certain people were also prevented from voting in their polling unit and in their constituency. It got to the point that even an aspirant of another party, in that area, because the entire area was in support, of a particular political party. And they said, look, they didn't just stop from stopping her from actually participating in the electoral process. Casualties were recorded. Her house was burnt. Quite a number of things were done to her. This is a political party. So you mean if you look to the right and to the left, and you see that all the political parties, or some of the leading political parties, are involved, in one level of electoral crime or the other. Can we still continue to say that, or is it safe to admit that with the uniform level, of violence, with the uniform level of malpractice that is involved in this election, that perhaps it is an improvement that we need upon our political institutions, or that it and the Nigerian voters who needs more orientation?
I think it's a two-way thing. Our voters need more orientation. The followers of some of these politicians as well. I think politicians actually need to talk to their followers, because most of the things you see play out during elections, I can assure you that most of these flag bearers don't even give commands to these people, maybe telling them to go and unleash violence. They don't, but people just get too emotional and too excited, and the fear of losing elections. So because of that, they try to intimidate people so that things can go their way. But I think it's a two-way thing. On the part of the people, you need to think properly. What's the essence of an election? Is to be able to elect leaders that will be able to move the nation forward. Now, how do you get to elect these leaders if the process is not free and fair? It's all about casting your vote. So if you keep on intimidating people, threatening people, beating people up, killing people, then who are these Nigerians that will now come out to vote? So on the side of the people, the leaders of each political party, they need to educate their people. And then you begin to wonder, what's their level of literacy? What exactly, do they even understand the essence of elections? I really doubt, because if you look at some of these followers, I really wonder if they really know exactly, or they are just doing things out of loyalty. But you can't be too loyal to a man that you get to the point of destruction, causing pains to other people and all that. So I think a whole lot needs to be done. But for me, I think it's a shame for our nation that at this time we are unable to conduct a properly free and fair election. Look at Kenya, for instance. In 2022, I think about September or October, they conducted their presidential elections, and Kenyans in the diaspora were able to vote. But Nigerians in the diaspora couldn't vote. And this was one election that Nigerians in the diaspora were fully involved.
That's interesting. I think it's high time, we actually talk about some of, the standing issues before the election proper. So you spoke earlier about the electoral law. Yeah. We saw in February of 2022 how that law, was being promulgated. Everybody was excited that finally the 2023 election is going to be free and fair, since we have laws, that will guide us specifically. And, one of the provisions, one of the judgments, that was raised, issues that was raised, was the fact that if we want the Nigerian people to be involved, in this electoral process, yes, thanks to the over 12 million people that went out to vote, even though about almost 3 million, was eventually cancelled due to overvoting and double registration and all of that. But we still had over 9.3 million people, registered for that process. So yes, a lot of people came into the net to want to participate. And when you fast forward to the election proper, and you consider the figures, that were existing, the 84 million registered voters that we had in 2019, with the 9.3 million that was added, in 2022, and going to the 2023 elections, you put the two figures together, and you now look at the level of participation, voter turnout, after the 2023 presidential National Assembly election. The figures show that there was more turnout in 2019 than 2023. And then you begin to wonder. So you had the Nigerian people who said they have become woke, who want to participate, whom, as we see, are busy on social media and other platforms talking about their mandate. And then you realize that we do not even have figures up to 2019 that produced the number of voters and the percentage of voters that made President Muhammadu Buhari, that gave him his second term. So would you really say that we have achieved that participation drive, that we really want in Nigeria, to the point where Nigerians can go and then the system embraces and welcomes them, and then they can express, their franchise to elect a leader?
Yeah, I would say yes, we've achieved that. But remember, there were certain Nigerians were disenfranchised on the side of INEC. I know about 50 persons that couldn't get their PVCs. They kept on going to INEC offices over and over and over and over. They kept on asking questions. So you can imagine, if I know 50, someone could actually know about 100. Someone in the South could know about 200. So if you put all this together, certain Nigerians were frustrated. And then that takes me to a particular matter, because, two people now had to sue INEC, saying, look, why can't we use our temporal voters card to vote? So a lot of Nigerians were disenfranchised. These were people that were eager to vote. These were people that were tired of the happenings. Remember, a lot has gone down in our nation. Bad power supply, the steady insecurity, lack of jobs. A whole lot has gone down. So Nigerians were at that point, they felt that it's time to make a bold statement, and Nigerians were ready. But they couldn't get their PVC. My closest friend couldn't find this PVC. So if you put all this together, and then at my polling unit, we got there at 7 a.m. INEC officials came at 12 noon. Some Nigerians had waited, and some got tired and left. Even when they came, they were not organized. They couldn't coordinate things properly. So certain people got angry and left, because they started feeling that it was maybe the INEC were trying to work against the people. So some people left. So if you put all these factors together, and then we also have issues of violence, people threatening you, if you're not going to vote in this direction, leave. Certain people would leave because people actually value their lives. more than going out to cast a vote. What's the essence of casting a vote when I won't return back home alive? So certain Nigerians actually left some polling units. There were reports of violence in some parts of the nation. My brother, you won't see people come to your polling units shooting everywhere, and then you want to stay and say, I want to cast my vote. So if you put all this together, this could be responsible for the decline in people that came out to vote. Yes, they were on social media. They were vocal. Some Nigerians even call them social media. I'm trying to remember the name. I understand. But then, put all these factors together. People couldn't get their PVCs. Some people were attacking polling units. INEC officials itself, they were not coordinated. I reached out to the INEC people at my polling unit and I said, why are you just coming here? They said they couldn't get proper logistics in terms of transportation to be able to convey them to the polling unit. And then, you look at the budget of INEC for these elections, 355 billion naira. And then in the FCT, at a particular polling unit, in the city center, INEC officials were now telling you they couldn't get vehicles to convey them to. So if you put all this together, Mr. Lubenga, I believe these were some of the little unseen issues that led to, a decline in voters turning out compared to 2019.
All right, no doubt. I want to believe that progress, is systemic in nature. Yeah. I mean, it's incremental in nature. Growth is incremental. We continue to grow, from one level or the other. But before we, go for that, the 2023, February 25th, have actually given us a president-elect in the person of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu of the All Progressives Congress. And you will continue to see that the leading opponents are challenging his victory at the polls. First, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar is challenging it. Secondly, you have Labour Party, Peter Obi, also challenging the result of these elections. And, earlier during the introduction, we gave you insights, into some of their positions. Now, I'd like to start with the candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi. He said he is confident, that in the judiciary of Nigeria, that he walked through this legal process, and he's very sure that he will be declared the winner of the 2023 presidential race. Is that still possible, given, the statistics available, that led to the emergence of the president-elect Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu?
Well, if he came out to say that, he won the elections and he's going to prove it to Nigerians, that means maybe he's been able to gather a few facts to show that he actually won the elections. And you understand this, Peter Obi has been there before. I remember when he was governor in Anambra, before he became governor, he had issues like this against Chris Ngige, and he was able to win at the court. So I believe he has his facts.
In what was reported to be an inconclusive election at the time.
I wouldn't want to dabble into that, but then he was able to win in court and he became governor, ruled for 8 years. So I believe he's had his facts, together, because on the day of the elections, we saw people snapping. I think there's a form that is called, E8 or something.
E8.
You saw Nigerians, it was all over the nation, people circulating it and all that. So, but then the crux of the matter is that INEC were unable to upload results in real time. Now, because of that, certain people can actually say, look, there were certain things that didn't go well. So because of that, they are going to challenge it. And for me, they have the right to challenge the process. It's part of their fundamental human rights to challenge whatever they feel that didn't go down well. So I think we should just leave it to time, and then our electoral process as well. But then a whole lot has gone down recently. If you consider the Naira no issue and all that, the Supreme Court giving a ruling, and it looks like certain people are not obeying. So Nigerians are even beginning to lose confidence and hope in the Supreme Court. But like Peter Obi said, he has trust in the judiciary and he's sure that they are going to give a fair judgment. I think we should just keep our fingers crossed.
All right. While we wrap up, in this segment of the conversation, we have the candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi. We also have the candidates of the People's Democratic Party, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. Both of them are saying, I won. I came top. And I'm confident I'm going to prove this in court. And we've also had the same Peter Obi come back to say, well, he's not really challenging the result, of the elections, but he's challenging the process.
I think he said he's not challenging the candidate of the Labour Party.
He said he's not challenging the result of the election, per se. What he is challenging is the process that brought about the result in the last elections. I'd like to get your view about that statement. A lot of people say that statement sounds like someone who is confused.
Well, I think what he's trying to say is if the process is free and fair, we won't get the result we are getting at this time. So if you want to fix a house, you need to go back to the foundation. So the process is the foundation. The result is the end point. I mean, you're in your room, the AC, everything is working, the walls are looking clean, and the house is shaking. What do? You go back to the foundation. So what he means by challenging the process is how free and fair was the process? What were the elements that, was actually working against the success of the process? So you can't want to fix a house that is shaky and then you go to remove the roof. No, you go back to the foundation. So the foundation of an electoral process is actually checking the process. How sincere were the electoral officers? What were the level of, irregularities that took place? How were there votes buying? Were people snatching ballot boxes? Was there intimidation? Were there videos? That's why they talk about evidence. So I think in the coming days, we'll see a whole lot of things play out. But like I said, if you want to understand how you arrived at it, it's just like mathematics. You can't just say 2 + 2 is 4. How did you get to that point? So you have to go back to... So what Peter Obi is simply saying is, look, okay, we've seen the result, perfect, but let's check the process. Let's check the foundation.
Well, interesting that he will check the process, especially in the next few days, because the 21 days, elasticity will soon lapse, and then we'll see whether he will be able to draw up a case in court in favor or to back up his claims, regarding the 2023 presidential elections. But it's unfortunate that time is no longer on our side for that. I have to let you go for the moment. I'm sure that we'll have the conversations perhaps during the governorship election or maybe right after. But it's such a great pleasure to have you join me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. All right, we have been speaking with Fineface Nsika, a political analyst right here in the studios, talking about the intricacies of the presidential election and, of course, the election petition tribunals and some of the actors involved. It's been a wonderful conversation, I must say. I'll go on this quick break. When we return, we'll move into the second segment of this conversation. It promises to continue to be interesting like it already is, so don't move a muscle. We'll be right back in such a moment.